Hi there, this is Math 0018 Section 2.10 and today we're looking at proportions. If I can get my pen. Okay, so we're going to look at solving proportions today. So a proportion is just an equation that shows the equality of two ratios or rates. And this is the standard format of a proportion. A over B equals C over D. So you have one fraction equal to another fraction. And there's some examples of proportions listed underneath there. 3/6 equals 1/2. $30 over 4 pounds equals $90 over 12 pounds, and 250 miles to 5 hours is equal to 50 miles to 1 hour. Okay, so that's what a proportion is it just shows that two ratios or rates are equal to each other. Now, a proportion is true if when you cross multiply you get the same number. So if those cross products are equal, then the proportion is true. So look at this proportion we have here. 45 over 135 equals 3 over 9. So to tell if it's true or not, you cross multiply. Okay, so I'm going to be lazy and use my calculator. 45 times 9 is 405. Okay. And then 3 times 135 is also 405. So that proportion is true because when you cross multiply, the cross products come out to be equal. Now, today we're going to look at solving these proportions. So this is what you're going to do. If you have a proportion A over B equals C over D, the proportion kind of property there says that you can cross multiply and those two cross products, A times D, will be equal to B times C. So that's what we're going to use to solve these proportions. So the first step is to cross multiply. Then put those cross products equal to each other in an equation. So you'll multiply, get the one side equals, and cross multiply the other side and put that on the other side. Then solve that equation and check your solution. So let's get started. So here it says solve the proportions. Now I am usually going to cross multiply so that my variable ends up on the left side if possible. That just makes it a little bit easier for you to recognize what the equation looks like. So we have 7 over 12 equals 42 over x. So when I cross multiply, I'm going to put the term with the x on the left side. So 7 times x is just 7x equals, and then we're going to have 12 times 42 on the other side. Okay? And I don't know what 12 times 42 is, but that is 504. So you multiply there equals 7x. Okay, now it's just a plain old regular equation like we've solved earlier in chapter 2. Divide by 7 on both sides. Okay, and you can use your calculator for this stuff. So we get x, because the 7's cancel, equals 72. Okay? And if you plugged it back in where the x was, if you cross multiply there, you'll see that you get the same number, so it's a true proportion, and that means your solution is correct. All right, over here we have 4 over 5 equals 3 over x minus 3. Now, you have to be careful because when you multiply the 4 and the x minus 3, you have to keep that x minus 3 in parentheses because that's all one set of one term there underneath the 3. So we're going to have 4 and parentheses x minus 3 equals 3 times 5 on the other side. Or you could also write 5 times 3. The order does not matter there, okay? Now, we haven't done an equation where we've had parentheses, but it's not any different. We have done lots of expressions with the distributive property, so it's no different from that. So what you're going to do is you're going to take the 4 and distribute it through the parentheses. So 4 times x is 4x, and 4 times a negative 3, remember that sign goes with the 3, would be negative 12, okay, equals 3 times 5 is 15. So now that's the equation we need to solve. So just be careful, make sure if you need to go back and review the distributive property that you look back over that. Now, to solve this equation, we're not messing with 4x. We're going to get rid of that negative 12, get rid of that constant. So add 12 to both sides, and 4x equals, because the 12's cancel, 15 plus 12 is 27. Ugh, what an answer. Okay, now divide by 4 to finish it up. Okay, and I know it seems weird, but we're just going to leave the answer as an improper fraction, 27 over 4. Nothing goes into both 27 and 4. It didn't say to round it off or anything, so you just leave it as an improper fraction. Now, excuse me, these problems say solve round to the nearest hundredth. Okay, so we're still going to do the same thing. We're going to cross multiply. So I'm going to keep the variable on the left, 3n equals 2 times 15 on the other side. So 3n equals 30, because that's what 2 times 15 is. Now this one we're not going to have to round. This is going to come out nice and even. So divide by 3, just like we've been doing on all of our equations. The 3's cancel, and n equals 10. All right, number 4 here, we're going to do the same thing, cross multiply. So 25n equals 5 times 21. And let's see, that would be 105 when you multiply there, equals 25n. Now divide by 25 on both sides. Now because the directions say round to the nearest hundredth, you go to your calculator, 105 divided by 25, excuse me, and you get 4.2. Now, since technically the number after the 2 is a 0, if they really wanted it to show that you've got something to the hundreds, you could put the 0 on there, but they should also still accept 4.2 because it just came out nice and even. Okay? All right, so here's some more examples. We have 4 over 3 equals n minus 2 over 6. So remember, you want to keep that n minus 2 in parentheses when you do your cross multiplying. So we're going to have 3 times n minus 2 equals 4 times 6 on the other side. So we're going to distribute the 3. So 3 times n would be 3n, and 3 times a negative 2 would be negative 6. So when you multiply, when you say what the sign is, write it there. So if it's a negative, put a minus sign, or if it's positive, a plus sign. Equals 24. So now we need to get rid of that negative 6, because remember, don't mess with the 3n yet. So we're going to add 6 to both sides, and the 3n comes down, the 6's cancel, and it equals 30. Now, last step, divide by 3. Oh, it's a messy 3. Sorry about that. N equals 10. That's a nice problem. I like that one. Okay? So, let's look at the next one. 5 over 6 equals 2 over x minus 9. So remember, keep that x minus 9 in parentheses. So we have 5 times x minus 9 equals 6 times 2. Okay, we're going to distribute the 5, so that's 5 times x is 5x. 5 times a negative 9 is negative 45, equals 6 times 2 would be 12. Now, next step, don't mess with the 5x, get rid of that 45. So add 45 to both sides, and 5x comes down. The 45's cancel, and we get 57. Okay, that's not going to come out nice either. Let's see, divide by 5 on both sides, and 5, there's nothing that will go into those two, so we're just going to leave it as an improper fraction because they didn't give us any directions to round off or anything. So just 57 over 5 is your final answer there. Okay. Now, along in this section, we also have some application problems. Okay, this is probably one of the few. We've had some translating problems where we had to take verbal expressions and translate them into math, but we haven't had a whole lot of other word problems yet. So, on these problems, these are not going to be crazy hard because you're going to set up a proportion for all of these. Okay. first step is to read the problem, and you may need to read it more than once. So don't just read and go, oh, I don't get it. You may have to read it a couple times for it to sink in what they're looking for. Then you're going to set up a proportion, okay? And the main thing you need to know about setting up these proportions is that it has to be in the same order on both sides of the equal sign, okay? So in other words, if you put miles over hours on the left, you better have miles over hours on the right-hand side with the equal sign in the middle, okay? If you've got feet per second, feet per second. Apples to oranges, apples to oranges. Boys to men, remember them? Long time ago? Boys to men. Okay, I promise I won't sing a boy band song. So, but you've got to have them in the same order on both sides. Very important, okay? Once you get the proportion set up, the rest is pretty simple because you cross multiply, you solve it, and check your answer. Okay, so it's getting the proportion set up that's the hardest part of this whole process here. Okay, so it says a customer sees an ad in a newspaper advertising 2 tires for $266.50. The customer wants to buy 5 tires and use one as a spare. How much will the 5 tires cost? So to me, the easiest thing to do is to write in words what I'm going to set up as my proportion. And I just do it in the order that they give it to me. Okay, the first thing they said was it's 2 tires. Okay, so I'm going to put tires for $266.50. So that's tires over money. Okay, that's what I'm going to set up for my proportion. So I have 2 tires for $266.50. Okay, equals the customer wants to buy 5 tires, but we need to know how much will it cost. So look at what you set up, tires over money. So we know we want 5 tires, so that's going to go on top because that's where the tires go, and we don't know how much it's going to cost. That's going to be X. So they're going to have to give you 3 of the 4 places in the proportion when you're doing these applications. Okay, now it's just like every other proportion we've done. We cross multiply, so we have 2 times X equals 5 times 266.50. Okay, so bring down 2X and now pull out your handy dandy calculator. 5 times 266.50 is 1,332.50. Okay, and now we divide by 2 to get rid of that coefficient. Divide by 2. So X equals $666.25. And that would be it. So that's how much the 5 tires will cost. Okay? All right. Let's see what's next. A caterer estimates that 5 gallons of coffee will serve 50 people. At this rate, how much coffee is needed to serve 70 people? Okay, so we've got gallons of coffee over people, right? We need to know how many gallons for how many people. So the first thing they told us was that 5 gallons will serve 50 people, okay? And also, whenever you see at this rate, that always tells you, hey, you're going to be setting up a proportion. So that's one way you can kind of tell, oh, this is a proportion word problem. So at this rate, how much coffee is needed to serve 70 people? So if you're not really sure what goes where, 70 people, that's got to go on the bottom, 70. And we want to know how many gallons of coffee will we need. Okay? So we cross multiply. All right, so we have 50 times X equals 5 times 70. Now, one thing I should tell you here, some people might want to try and cancel the 5 and the 70 or something before you get started. You cannot do that. You cannot cross cancel in a proportion. You can only cross multiply. So be very careful about that. So cross canceling is not allowed. Okay? We're just going to make that shorter. Is wrong. Don't do it. All right? You can only cross multiply, if you can spell it. Cross multiply only. So if you think the numbers look big, you get over it because you have a calculator. Okay? So don't worry about, oh, those numbers seem so big, I should cancel. You can't do that. All right, so we have 50x equals 350. Okay? Then divide by 50. Oh, that was weird. On both sides. Okay? So the 50s cancel, and x equals, should be 7. Okay, so, and that would be 7 gallons of coffee, not 7 people. Okay, we're looking for how much coffee. All right. Okay, number 3. An air conditioning specialist recommends 2 air vents for every 300 square feet of floor space. At this rate, how many air vents are required for an office building of 21,000 square feet? Okay, so we've got air vents, right? Vents to square feet. Okay, that's what we want to set up. So it says that he recommends 2 air vents for every 300 square feet. Okay, so that's the first side of our proportion. And then there's those 3 words again. At this rate, how many air vents? Well, we're looking for the vents, so that's going to be X on top, would be required for an office building of 21,000 square feet. So that's the square feet. That's going to go on the bottom. Okay, so if you have problems setting it up, you just really need to make sure that, I think this over here with writing out the words is probably the best thing to help you get it set up correctly. Okay, and that is an E, even though it doesn't look like it. Vents. Okay, looks like Vince. But anyway, so we're going to have 300x equals 2 times 21,000. Okay, so 300x equals 42,000. Okay, and then we divide, let's see, 42,000 divided by 300 comes out to be, let's see, let me go ahead and write these steps down. Divide by 300. So we get x equals 140. Now, remember, that's 140 air vents. Okay, I'm not real picky about you making sure that that it's vents, but your next teacher might be. So it's a good thing, good habit to get into, to know what it was you found, because there's a lot of teachers that want you to write that out or something like that. Okay, number 4. A painter estimates that 5 gallons of paint will cover 1,200 square feet of wall surface. At this rate, there's those 3 words again, how many gallons are required to cover 1,680 square feet? Okay, so we've got gallons of paint over square feet. Okay. All right, so we have 5 gallons will cover 1,200 square feet. Okay, and then at this rate, we want to know how many gallons. Well, the gallons are on top. That's what we're looking for. So that's going to be X, and we'll cover. We need to cover 1,680 square feet. Okay, so there's our proportion. Now we cross multiply. So 1,200x equals 5 times 1680. Okay, so bring down the 1200x, do your multiplying. 5 times 1680 gives you 8400. Okay, and then to solve and get x by itself, remember you divide by 1200 on both sides. And it should come out to 7, I'm pretty sure. Let's check that out. Oh, I am good. Yep, you get 7. All right, and so that would be 7 gallons, okay, of paint. All right. So here's some you tries. So pause your video, try these on your own. Number 1, 8 over 3 equals n minus 5 over 6. So make sure you keep that n minus 5 in parentheses. We're going to have 3, because we're going to cross multiply, times n minus 5 equals 8 times 6. Okay, so distribute the 3. So that would be 3n, and 3 times negative 5 would be negative 15 equals 8 times 6 is 48. So now, just look at your equation. You need to get rid of that negative 15. So you add 15, and 3n will come down. We get, what, 63. Okay, and then the last step, divide by 3. The 3's cancel, and n equals 21. Okay, not too bad. Number 2, we have x over 12 equals 3/4. So we're going to cross multiply, and I'm still keeping that term with the x on the left. 4 times x equals 12 times 3. So 4x equals 36 when you multiply, and then divide by 4. So x equals 9. All right, so there's those two. Okay, so here's some more. Now remember, if any of these terms, I think it's just going to be easier on you if you'll put, if anything has more than one term on the numerator or denominator, put it in parentheses. Okay, now we didn't really do any of these where they had variables in both places. Okay, so look at what you've got. In other words, you've got an x with the 16 and you've got an x with the 8. So I'm going to start with the 16x, okay, equals, and it would be 8 times x minus 2. But this will go back, to an equation that you know how to solve. So we have 16x comes down, and then we're going to distribute the 8. So 8 times x would be 8x, and 8 times a negative 2 would be negative 16. Okay? Now, we have done equations like this with variables on both sides. Remember the first step? Get those variables to the left, to the left. Okay, so I'm going to subtract 8x from both sides, and that would give me 8x. These 8x's are gone, and negative 16 comes down. Okay, so now 8x equals negative 16. Divide by 8 on both sides. So x equals negative 2. So don't let the extra variables in there bother you. It's still going to be set up just like a regular equation, and you just have to look and see where your variables are to see where you need to start. Look at number 4 here. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to cross multiply. I want to keep that x minus 2 in parentheses there. So on this one, we're going to have 14 times 2x, or you could have put 2x times 14, it doesn't matter, okay, equals 7 times x minus 2, okay? So 14 times 2x, you are not distributing there because that's just one term, 2x. You're just multiplying. 14 times 2 would be 28x. That's all you get on that side. Now, we are distributing the 7 because there's two terms there. So 7 times x is 7x, and 7 times negative 2 would be negative 14. Okay? So now I want to get, see the variables are on opposite sides, so I want to get them to the left. I'm going to subtract 7x from both sides. So that's going to be 21x equals negative 14. Okay? And now to get rid of that 21 there so that the x is by itself, divide by 21 on both sides. Okay? So we have x. Now over here, you can't divide 14 by 21, but we can reduce that. 7 will go into both of those numbers. Okay? So negative 14 divided by 7 is negative 2, and on the bottom, 21 divided by 7 is 3. So we end up with negative 2/3. Okay? All right. So now here we have some application problems. So Tallahassee Community College has 3 advisors for every 10 students. At this rate, there's those words again, how many advisors are needed for 600 students? So here's what I would set up. We've got advisors over students. Okay? So it says we have 3 advisors for every 10 students. So that's what we're going to set up as the first side of our proportion. At this rate, how many advisors are needed for 600 students? So they've given us the other number of students. So the 600 goes to the bottom, and we want to know how many advisors. The x is not always going to be on top. It has been a lot of times, but not always. So don't always think, oh, the x always goes on top. It just depends on how the problem is worded. All right, so we're going to cross multiply. And we have 10 times x, I'm keeping that variable on the left, equals 3 times 600. So 10x equals 1800. 100, okay? And then remember, divide by 10 on both sides. The 10's cancel, and x equals 180. And that would be 180 advisors. That's what we were looking for. How many advisors? Okay? All right, number 6. A survey found that 210 homes out of 300 had cable. At this rate, how many homes would have cable in a town of 25,000 homes? Okay, so let's see, we've got cable, and it's kind of weird because they kind of word it backwards there, but be careful. Out of how many homes, okay? All right, so it says a survey found that 210 homes out of 300 had cable. So 210 had cable out of the 300 homes. Okay, so that's what you need to see. And so even though it says 210 homes, they're talking about those 210 homes had cable. So make sure you read that correctly. That's a little tricky. At this rate, so those 3 famous words again, how many homes would have cable in a town of 25,000 homes? So we want to know how many would have cable. Well, that's on the top. How many have cable, okay? Out of 25,000 homes. Okay, so that one's kind of tricky. Make sure you read it carefully. All right, so we're going to cross multiply. We have 300x equals some ridiculously large number. Okay, 25,000. All right, let me get the calculator out again. 300x comes down equals some big number. Okay, 210 times 25,000 is 4 zeros. Okay, so what the heck number is that? 5,250,000. That's a big number. All right, and now don't worry about big numbers because you have a calculator. It's no big deal. Okay, divide by 300 on both sides. Yeah. Okay, and the 300s cancel, and we go back to the handy dandy calculator, and we get 17,500. That's how many you would expect to have. Those homes would have cable, okay, out of the 25,000. All right, let's see. Number 7. A quality control inspector found 3 rotten eggs in a shipment of 500 eggs. Ugh, what a job. Okay, at this rate, how many eggs would be rotten in a shipment of 2,000 eggs? Okay, so here's what we have. We have rotten over all of the eggs, right? So he found 3 rotten eggs out of 500 in the shipment. Okay? All right, at this rate, how many eggs would be rotten? Well, we don't know. So the X is on top. In a shipment of 2,000 eggs. That's a bunch of omelets. All right, so we cross multiply. And we have 500x equals 3 times 2,000. That I can do without a calculator. Yay me. That's 6,000 equals 500x. Okay, and now just like before, to get rid of that 500, we're going to divide by 500. And it should be 12. But let me double check with the calculator just to make sure. Nothing worse than a math teacher that can't do calculations correctly, right? 12. Oh, man. 2 in a row. Pretty good. So 12 rotten eggs, right? That's not bad out of, what, 2,000? That's a pretty good rate, I guess. Okay. Oh, and guess what? We are done. So that's it for 2.10. Yes, 2.10. This is also the end of Chapter 2.